Hi there, welcome. I'm here today with Linda Eastburn and her new book, Spy Your Way to Power and Success. Linda, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here and happy to talk with you about my new book.
So, Spy Your Way to Power and Success is the title of the book, but maybe you could give us a quick insight into what the book is really about.
Well, it's an interesting process of really creating the life you want to live. But it's done so through kind of a biophysics process, which I'll explain probably in more detail later on. But it's a lot. It's linked to things like the law of attraction, visualization. Only it's kind of a deeper version of that. But it's being able to see into future events, being able to see those opportunities in advance, kind of like remote viewing, and then being able to manifest those all the way into the reality that is the life you want to live.
Nice. Now, what inspired you to write this book?
I was I've been teaching intuitive skills for a really long time, and I have always been able to see future events that came into my life, and they've always been a guiding force to be able to accomplish those opportunities as they came along. So I decided one day that I would like to pass that on to other people. So that's what inspired me to start the book.
Nice. And you said you've been teaching this for a long time.
I haven't been teaching the SPI technique for that long, but I've been teaching intuition for a long time.
Gotcha. So, the spy technique, how did this process come to you?
I kind of had to back engineer my life experiences because I have seen
Hmm,
so many things that in advance, like I said, it just kind of came to me one day that I needed to understand the exact process that was going on. And so I got together with a physicist friend of mine that I'd worked with for a long time, and we started kind of remote viewing the whole process, as well as deciphering many of the things that he understood as a physicist into the project. And so we looked at this very deeply to try to figure out what was really happening. How can people recreate many of the things that I had done in my life? And thus the spy technique came up came along.
nice. I know you said you were working with a physicist,
Mhm.
um, and I know you talk in here about a biophysics process. And what exactly? I'd love to know what you mean by a biophysics process.
Well, it's biological, by and large. It has a lot to do with the light, the photon lights that the human body emits. What we found was during deep concentration, the body produces way more biophotons than it does when the body's just idle. And especially when one is remote viewing or doing really intense psychic types of work, the body produces a tremendous amount of light. When that light goes out, it can move into the future, and I'll explain that a little bit later on. But as that light goes out, when you're deeply concentrated, it begins to take form kind of on a quantum level, not physically, but on a quantum level, it takes a kind of form to it. And if you follow the spy technique, you can take that form that is created on a quantum level and begin to manifest that into more and more of a reality of matter, just a physical event or a physical occurrence or even a substance.
Wow. So, what exactly is a biophoton?
Biophoton is just something naturally produced in the body. When the DNA is excited, it will excite the cells, and the cells then produce biophotons. It's very minute. They are measurable, but it takes very, very specific equipment to measure them. They have been measured, however, with people who are doing psychokinesis, things of that sort. That are there again. It takes really deep concentration.
Gotcha. So, do we all produce these biophotons?
Yeah, they're very natural, very, very,
Okay.
very natural substances that comes from the body. It's just a natural light. It probably produces our aura in lots of ways, as well as the torsion energy produces our aura. And torsion energy is something that is just in the universe. The sun produces it, as well as many other things. I know there are certain patents that even use this energy, but the body produces it as well. We just have not learned how to actually manage it or use it to manifest or to see the future.
Okay. So this torsion energy, is that something that you found a way to manifest, to tap
Yeah.
into?
Yeah, one of the things we did was look at past experimentation with charged energy fields, and there again, that's a physicist term more than it would be, a remote viewer's term. But
Mhm.
that's something that we looked into. And a charged energy field is something that it was discovered and it's measurable. There's higher voltage at certain locations where there's a lot of consciousness that has been um, produced there in very spiritual forms, such as Stonehenge, sacred sites, sacred mounds, even possibly even religious institutions might have a lot of kind of a profound kind of charged energy. One of the things that we also recognized was that healing energy has a lot of this charged energy field around it. There was an experiment done where they took it was in a lab, and there was a long lab table, and they put two separate rats under anesthesia, and one on one end did not receive any of this charged healing energy, but the other end there was a group of healers that projected healing energy to this rat, and the rat would always on the side of the table where the rat was always receiving on the receiving end of this healing energy, the rat would wake up early and very spry and seem to be healthier. So I once repeating this at the same lab, at the same table. Once they stopped, what they began to notice was on the end of the table where this energy was projected, the rats continued to improve more rapidly than the types of surgeries or things that they were doing with the rats on the other end of the table, as if there is something there that remained, something that stayed. So we decided to experiment with using this charged energy field around the insights, as I call them. You can call them intuitions if you want to, but having these insights of seeing opportunities sitting out in the future. Now, this is something that I've done all my life. I just didn't know everything I was doing, all of the things that I would
Wow.
have to know in order to teach someone how to do this. So that was a process, and that took a little bit of time, and that's when the book was born.
Wow. So, how does a person go about creating this charged energy?
Well, that's part of the course that I teach, to be able to learn to do it. It's a repetitive type of activity that you would do. But in the beginning, it's really about getting to know yourself, because you can't do it without proper motivation, and you will continue to recreate things that you don't want in your life if you don't understand who you are in the beginning. So we start from the very beginning. It's a developmental process of really the use of energy fields by the whole person. I mean, you can say, okay, I want this automobile, say a new car. You want this car, and you might be able to find it and be able to manifest that in some way in your life. But the new car may or may not satisfy you long term. So, what we really encourage people to do is to get to know who they are and to know the life that they really want to live, and to be able to take that motivation from a deeper part of themselves into this process, so that they are manifesting things and seeing opportunities that are truly real for them to make their life happier, better, the life they want.
So, really the first step here is really getting to know yourself.
That's the first stage of the SPI technique, yes.
Nice. So, I know, one of the things you refer to in the book is the box, and I'd love it if you could expand on what you mean by the box.
Well, I think we're all born believing in limitations because we are so programmed. We're institutionalized to believe that we are so limited. And people actually get very angry when you tell them you can see the future, even though I see my future almost every single day, but they actually get angry about that. So I think between our family settings, our communities, social media, all the way through to schools, universities, churches. I mean, whatever we're part of, in our life, we are sort of programmed to believe that we are very limited on what we can do, what we can perceive, and then what we can manifest. So we live within a rather tiny little box of limitations. So that's another part of the process, is beginning to move out of those limitations. Now that can be a little scary sometimes because life is very familiar when you're in the box. When you move out of the box and you begin to see that there's a lot of personal empowerment that you can gain from being free of that, from seeing who you really are, from seeing these just really natural qualities that we're all given but just don't know how to use because it's been institutionalized out of us. Small child might be able to see the future easily, or even just know things psychically, but soon they begin to realize that they're not supposed to. So therefore they stop. So we have to go back to the beginning and say, okay, we can do this. Step out of the box and recognize your life does not have to be stagnant, and it does not have to be limited. So we encourage that, and it's just part of the process. It's a developmental part of that, where you begin to recognize who you are and what you want, and then teach you how to achieve it.
Wow. So I know you were talking about like how many children have much more ready access to this kind of energy, to being able to do these kinds of things. Do you think that why do you think it is that we then lose that?
Well, like I said, there again, it's one of those things that we're told that that's not possible, or if you see something, if you know something, that it's just not acceptable
Okay.
by society for the most part. So I think eventually people just stop using it, and a child grows into adulthood, and they grow into adulthood generally without a lot of perception there. But in my research, I found that something like 3 billion people on the planet have seen the future, have seen something in the future. Well, 3 billion people can't all be wrong. So I think that there is definitely something to see in the future. And because I teach it and I do it, and, do it almost every day, I see something in the future. So I know it's possible. And I teach other people to be able to go in and get that same type of information. But it's not just information about the future, even though most days may be more of a normal day, but it's seeing those opportunities that are there. And I'll share a story with you.
Yeah.
When I said I back engineered my life, one of the things that happened to me was my husband and I were in real estate investing, and we were small time investors, didn't have a lot, didn't have a lot of ready cash on hand, but we went to this open house that was going to be an auction one day. It was a 3-story, 8,000 square foot home
Wow.
on 22.22 acres of land, with a pool and this enormous living room that had a 3-story fireplace in it. And it was just absolutely gorgeous. Well, this was so far out of our budget, it wasn't even funny, So,
Yeah.
so we're driving around the land, though, just taking a look at it. It was a Sunday afternoon. It was really beautiful out. And suddenly I got this intuitive insight, this download that said, and I just have to blurt those out when they come in. And it said, this is going to sell for 300,000. Well, this was back in the 90s, and 300,000 was worth a lot more than it is today, of course. But the house had sold a couple of times for around $1 million even back then. Today it'd probably be worth closer to 2 or 3 million. So the minute I said, "This is going to sell for 300,000," my husband said, "Well, if it does, we need to buy it."
Yeah.
But we didn't have 300,000, and at an auction, you have to pay cash, within 2 or 3 weeks when the auction happens. You have very, very little time to come up with the money, right? So if you're gonna bid, you need to know you have the cash. So we proceeded to check into getting a loan on the house, and we found out what the down payment was and all of this. And we didn't even have enough money for the down payment, it just wasn't there. So we were debating on what to do, how to do it. We did, apply for the loan, but we were going to have to come up with the cash for the down payment to go ahead and execute that. So, oddly enough, and there again, that's that communication on that universal mind level where I think we're all in communication, but we needed this cash. And suddenly there were 2 individuals called out of the blue with absolutely zero prompt on our part, One of them wanted to buy a little small garage building that we owned. It was an active business, but we owned that, and they wanted to purchase it. It was a neighbor that was close to the garage, and he wanted to purchase it and had cash to pay and could close that week. Then we got another call from a gentleman who had looked at a storage unit that we owned and decided he wanted to buy that. So he had cash and wanted to close that week. And between the two, what we had was the down payment for, for this property. So
Wow.
we proceeded on. There again, I heard it clear as day. I was going to sell for 300,000, and I've had this happen to me so many times that I believed it would sell for 300,000. But we were holding close to moving forward with the purchase of this at the auction on the auction day. And when I say charged energy, that's what I mean by, putting a lot of concentration on something to make sure that it does manifest, putting that property into a charged energy field. I didn't know I was doing that, but I was doing that at the time. I wouldn't have called it that. What I was doing was holding tight and following through with purchasing this property. So the auction day came. The bid started at, maybe 100,000, 150,000. It quickly went up to 300,000. We had the bid and it was sold to us for 300,000 that day. So that's the kind of opportunities that have just kind of fallen in my lap. And it's like, well, I know I live somewhere slightly ahead of time because I'm often aware of things that are going to happen in the future, or I can scan and see them, scan and find them. So that's part of the SPI process, is helping people to understand they can see the future, step out of the box, step out of the limitation, see future opportunities, and then be able to hold those in a charged energy field to manifest them all the way to their reality.
Gotcha. So you believe, is this an ability to manipulate events in the future? Is it
Yeah,
sort of
it's influencing. I think, and of course, it goes into great detail in the book. But those biophotons are light, and light creates form. So you have the randomness of future events sitting out there in la la land, right? At a quantum level, they can go in any direction, and most of us just go through life letting randomness happen to us. It just occurs. But this is about being able to see those things. And once you see them, you've created form around them. Now, it doesn't mean that every single thing will manifest into your world. I mean, lots of things can happen that would change that or alter that. And I'll give you an example. When a remote viewer friend of mine does a lot of work for the police force, and they were looking to apprehend a gentleman, and they didn't know where he was located. So they hired this man, a remote viewer, to look and to tell them at a point in time in the future where this individual might be. So this man did look, and he saw this person going into a certain business, or he saw them inside the business at a certain time on a certain day. So the police force apprehended this man before he actually entered that building. So he was not sitting there that day because, due to knowing this in advance, they were able to apprehend him and stop that. But if they had not known about that, the man would have been sitting in that business in that on that day. So things can come along that change the future, even if you do see it as a reality happening. So you can influence that in some way. But the influence I'm really talking about is this charged energy field. Um, it's like there's almost like a hologram that's created when you first have this insight. I mean, that farm that I saw, that large house and that beautiful location that I saw, the minute I saw it, I created form around that. That's an energy field that has now encompassed the possibility of it selling for 300,000 and the possibility of us owning that for 300,000, right?
Mhm.
But if I had not followed through, continued that concentrated effort, continued that charged energy field, it because it wasn't ours yet, it was just a hologram being ours at that point. But as I concentrated on it, I held it firm, I held it tight, I held it close. And so I didn't let go of that energy, so it didn't dissipate. If I had allowed it to dissipate, then that hologram would have just disintegrated back into randomness, you see.
Okay. So I hear you saying, like, the hologram.
Mhm.
What exactly is a hologram? Is that something a person creates themselves? Is that, what is it?
I call it a hologram because it's probably the best way to describe it. It's something that appears almost to have form but doesn't have form yet. And as this hologram that I'm calling it begins to manifest or become more dense, it goes into what I refer to as virtual reality. And the virtual reality part, it starts interacting actually with us physically. It starts interacting with us. I remember one time. I had wanted to open up a small antique-like bookstore and really develop my intuitive capacity. And this was in a small town, a little bit Victorian town, a beautiful little town, a little artsy town, and I really wanted to do that, but I hadn't pursued it at all. I had my limits of what I was willing to pay for that shop, and because it was 2 hours away from my home, I really needed for it to have a place for me to stay overnight, a little kitchen, a bathroom or something, so I could stay there part time. So one morning I had a dream, and it was a dream of a billboard. This is a long story, so hang in there with me. It was a dream of a billboard. The day before, a friend of mine told me that when she dreamed of billboards and saw something, and then she saw the billboard the next day, she knew she was on track to something pretty special. Well, this morning I woke up and just I'd had a dream about some peanut butter, a certain brand of peanut butter. I thought, well, that's odd because I never buy that brand of peanut butter. I don't even recognize that brand of peanut butter. But anyway, that was my dream. So I woke up having the feeling I should go to that town and look for it. I knew I wouldn't find it. I mean, my conscious mind was saying, "Yeah, at the price I'm willing to pay with all the criteria that I'm wanting, it's like, yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen or not." But nonetheless, I decided to take that 2-hour drive down to the little Victorian town and look for it. And as I was driving down, I saw a billboard, believe it or not, with that brand of peanut butter advertised on it. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm probably on the right track. That's a synchronicity that happens to me. But you see, at that point, it's virtual. And when it's virtual, it starts really interacting with your personal life. So I drive down to the town. I make one sweep around the town, and I see this sign in a commercial space. It's a gorgeous antique looking space. It was probably an old grocery store. It had the double doors in the front with the screen windows and the displays, out front. And I thought, wow, that is something. It had a for lease sign. It's the only place I saw. So I swung back around and called the real estate lady, and she could show it to me that afternoon. So I had lunch, went back and went inside, and it was gorgeous. The beautiful hardwood floors. It just reeked of, a world gone by. And the tin ceiling, it was just wonderful. And it had a little counter, and so I walked behind the counter, and it's like, oh, there's a sink, a stove, and a refrigerator. A sink and a stove and a refrigerator. Really? Okay. That's good. Now we have one obstacle accomplished. So it had this little nook in the back and a door. And I thought, well, that's probably a closet. And then when I opened it up, it was a full bathroom. So it had this little nook where I could put a cot. It had a full bathroom, and it had the kitchen that I was needing to stay there part time. And when I asked her the price, it was the exact price that I needed for that I had set in motion that I was willing to pay. So there it was. There I had it. So yeah, it turned out just fine. I rented that. I developed my intuitive abilities at that little town, and it all worked out well. But it's following through on what you're asking for, what you're wanting, and then it's that opportunity presents itself.
So it's creating the hologram and then bringing that into your life.
It is, but it's a process. It's a process of learning how to work at that quantum level with this, to have the knowing of what to do when, having those insights come to you, and they can interact with you in multiple ways. It may be a dream, it may be in meditation. You can ask for it, you can do a scan, which is what I teach people to do, or it can be an actual physical thing that comes along that gives you the information. Doesn't really matter how you get the information, but it's a matter of being in touch enough to know that that information is there, that opportunity has presented itself, and if this is what you want, voila, there it is. But you have to follow through with it, and you have to hold it firm to be able to do it, actually do it. In other words, we had to be capable of getting that $300,000 home.
Mhm.
I had to be capable of paying the rent on that. little shop. I had to have the time and space and ability to do that. So you have to look at your life, and the things that you set in motion that you want, really, really do want, have to be realistic. People work with the law of attraction all the time, and I find it kind of comical. And I'm sure if you've ever seen this too, there's all of, $3 million is going to land in my lap today. And it's like, well, how's that working out for you? you know, because most of us don't have $3 million falling in our lap today.
Yeah.
A few people might win the lottery, but the law of attraction is a wonderful idea and thought, and I do believe it has some power and influence. I really do. And also, I think visualization does too. But those work on more of a thought and imagination level, where you're projecting it out there. This is working with knowing things where it's there. It's already there. It's already there. It's just not manifested into your reality yet. But it's already there.
Okay.
I remember once, my husband and I wanted a used white Jeep Cherokee. We had X amount of dollars, and we didn't want it to have any more than X amount of miles on it. This was back in the days when we were buying used vehicles. So I said, okay, I'm just going to scan. Is the opportunity sitting out there? Is it available? So I scanned, and I found a car lot that had a white Jeep Cherokee. In my mind, I'm scanning as these insights are coming in. The price was right. We drove over to that lot. There it was. Bought it, drove it home, and drove that for many years.
Wow. Now, I hear you keep talking about like, oh, I scanned for this. I scanned for this. What do you mean when you say you scanned for it?
I mean that I go in and create a dialogue with universal mind, because universal mind is omnipresent. It knows everything about everything. And we are part of that. We're connected to that. And it's like a hologram. It's been referred to as a hologram, the universal mind. And because we are part of that, we can also access all of that. So there's nothing that isn't available to us as far as being able to access knowledge of it. You can even access knowledge that it's not available. Like if there had not been a white Jeep Cherokee that day that I was scanning, I would have perceived, okay, I'm not picking up on one at this time. So there's no point in sitting here, constantly visualizing this thing that I want if it's not available, and no telling how long it's going to take to be available. That's a visualization process, and yes, you will be able to eventually probably draw that in, but it can be very time consuming. This is a very quick process. What I'm talking about, it can be long, but for the most part, it's very, very quick, because you're not working with things that are hypothetical. You're working with things that are very realistically possible.
Okay. So you're communicating with the universal mind.
Yes.
And communicating with the universal mind, is that different than, say, the conversation you and I are having right now?
Well, it's different in that I'm not hearing it with my ears, the way that the vibration that's coming in, and I'm decoding what you're saying because I've learned the English language as a child, and I understand and comprehend that. So when you're communicating with the universal mind, it can be a little different because you get impressions. Sometimes it's a clear knowing, like that message that I heard that this property is going to sell for 300,000. That was a very clear message. Most of the time, though, it may come back a little more symbolic than that, or it may come back in different terms. But you have to decode it, because it doesn't always come through as clearly as it does sometimes. Now, with the Jeep Cherokee, it did. I was specifically the street it was on, between here and here. I didn't get the car dealership name, but I knew where to go.
Mhm.
So that's where I went, and that's where it was. But sometimes I get addresses. I remember one time we had some merchandise stolen out of a garage, and I didn't know how to find our merchandise, other than remote viewing it, because the police certainly weren't going to go out searching for the items that was stolen out of the house. So I began to remote view the location, and I got a street, and I got a number of the street. The street number was wrong, but the block was correct. But I saw a white house with black shutters and a black roof, I believe. And out back was a fenced in area. There was a concrete block garage, and what I saw was the merchandise was inside that garage. It was very damp in there, in that garage. But these were the identifying markers. I mean, there are a lot of small white houses with black shutters and lots of fences, and I'm sure there are many concrete block garages around. I wasn't familiar with that particular street, but that did exist there, the place. But that wasn't the thing that told me it was the right place. It was the boat tarp down with a blue, like a blue tarp or something. And then there was this, do you remember those old Gremlin cars? Those
Yeah.
orange Gremlin cars?
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
those are relatively rare. So there was
Yeah.
one of those sitting in the driveway, and I saw it when I remote viewed it. So I did go over and look at all of that was present. However, the police just wouldn't, they couldn't, they didn't, they wouldn't, go in and look for it since it was just a remote viewing set. So I don't have any proof that my stuff was actually in there, but I kind of suspect it really was.
Yeah, sure. Of
Mhm.
course. So, I mean, I know you talked about, laws of attraction, things like that, and how this program's not doing that same thing, but how is this program different from something like prayer or a prosperity ministry?
It's not all that much different than a prayer or a prosperity ministry in that, you're utilizing something that, that you are highly focused. If you're very focused in a prayer, very focused in what you're drawing into yourself, or if you have enough communication with what I would call God, and I would say that universal mind is definitely a part of that godly force. It's not that much different from that. If that's how you want to term your belief system, you don't have to believe in God to believe in universal mind. However, it's just part of the process. But a lot of people believe that this is wrong somehow, or that it's, of the devil somehow. I've been doing this all my life, grew up very, very Christian, still engage in prayer, probably a much more expanded God today in my vocabulary than it was once upon a time. I wouldn't call myself overly religious today, but I would say I'm very spiritual today.
Okay. So, what would be the first step for someone? I mean, obviously buying your book.
Yeah.
Um, Beyond getting your book, what would be a first step someone could take to move towards being able to do what you do, to be able to manifest these things, to be able to create these holograms and energies?
Well, I think that for me, I started with self awareness. Because I had to know me, and then I had to become very aware of how I was using my energy all my life, how I used my energy, and then become aware of the intuitive process, being sensitive enough to my system to know when an impression was coming in, when it was important, when it mattered. To be able to be motivated enough to follow through with it rather than to just ignore those impressions, to understand myself well enough to know what I really truly did want with my life. I was an investor when that big property came along. I was an investor already. So that was already set in motion inside of me. I was very motivated to do well with that investing process. I was also very motivated when the little shop came along to be able to move to that little town and be able to create my intuitive abilities there more specifically. And that definitely occurred. It happened for me. So I think really knowing what you want, who you are, that's the beginning stage of all of this. You have a frequency, and that frequency is drawing like frequencies in at all times. That's the law of attraction. So if you know your frequency and you like what you're drawing in right now and you're doing everything, that's just really peachy keen fine for you, this probably isn't a program that you need. But if you want things to be better, if you want things to improve, if you want to have just a little bit more influence over what you are creating in your life and being able to see those things that are opportunities sitting out there available, then this is kind of like the law of attraction on steroids. So it just increases the potential that you will be able to do what you want to do. I've always been an entrepreneur. It's what I always wanted to do. And I've been an entrepreneur since the 80s. That's really worked out extremely well for me. So that's like a core part of my personal energy field. That's my frequency. I like to do things, the way I like to do things, and I don't like interference, from that. So I've always been able to accomplish that. So that's a part of who I am. So for me to sit down and go back into that little box that says, "Oh no, you should be working in corporate America and climbing the ladder of, and have all this prestige or whatever." And it's like, I don't think so. That's not true to my frequency. That's not true to who I am. So every person has to get to know themselves before they can understand, what are you creating now? You know, how are you creating that now? We often like to do the blame game, and this program certainly can't put a lot of blame outside of yourself, and whatever you're creating in your life, you own it because
Yeah.
you have influence. It's not to say there again that every single thing that you perceive is an opportunity out there is going to manifest in your life, because things do come along and interfere with that. We know that, but many things you can have influence and hold that charge and keep it going until it actually becomes a real part of your life.
Wow. So, what would you say is your goal with putting this book out there? What is it you're trying to create by manifesting this book?
Well, I think the book is a starting point to introduce people to the potential of the process of becoming a spy. And spy just means, being able to see the future. You're spying on future events. That's hidden to most people because they don't know how to do it. Um, and they don't do it on a regular basis. So you have to practice it. And, really to get accomplished at it, you just practice it. You just do it. So we teach you how to go in and begin to do that. But I think the goal of the book is to introduce people to that process, helping people to step out of their box and be able to have more of the life they actually really do want to live. And I think that's my reward at the end of the day.
Awesome. It would be a great reward.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Linda, for being with us here today.
Well, thank
Really
you for having
appreciate
me.
it
Yes.
and look forward to getting to talk to you again.
Okay. Thank you so much, Seth.